The countdown is on, folks. You probably have a figure in your mind. It's under 30, 7 and 26. I believe we're at 19 days. Yes, we are 19 days until the opener, USC San Jose State. This is Trojans Live for a 64th time. Matt Zemek's here from Trojans Wire. And of course, we appreciate Matt because without Matt, we don't have a show. So Matt delivers for us each and every Monday night, and I look forward to these conversations, and I know you do as well. Consider supporting us in any way possible, whether that's a super chat. You can certainly hit the like button to help the YouTube algorithm. Matt, how you doing tonight?
It has been a whirlwind because there's a new realignment story like every 90 minutes. It's just like, okay, you're done processing this story. Another one comes on. People who are, my age or older, I'm 47, but like people who, are relatively old, remember the Lucille Ball episode, the I Love Lucy episode, the conveyor belt with the chocolates, trying to keep up with the packaging, but then, she eats a few chocolates so that because she can't wrap them all at the same time. That's what this feels like, right? It's just another story on the conveyor belt. You can't fully write your story on one thing, and then another one comes along, and you're just frantically trying to keep up with that conveyor belt. It is just amazing the speed with which, another story comes along. So today, Monday, people might be watching this later in the week here at the Voice of College Football. But on Monday, in mid-morning, AAC. And then, later in the afternoon, ACC. And, of course, then there's reports about, the Pac-12 deal and how it fell apart and what was involved there. Just like big story after big story. We also had some insane statements from the weekend, like Ray Anderson, basically, Arizona State athletic director, saying, I'm not going to Morgantown. Like, okay, why would you even say that in public? A reminder, I'm in Phoenix. Ray Anderson's a terrible AD. You wonder, why Arizona State has struggled for so long in the revenue sports. It's because they don't have a good athletic director. And it's because their president, Michael Crow, who also, delivered this word salad about the Apple TV deal, but it's some 23rd century Star Trek technological thing that we were excited about. Like, you realize why these jokers haven't been able to, do a whole lot in football or basketball. Just the leadership is out to lunch, and like no one, at the top leadership level, the president, Michael Crow, the AD, Ray Anderson, neither of those two guys want to be in the Big 12. Like, they hate it. They absolutely hate it. They were dragged kicking and screaming by Arizona, by Robert Robbins, the president down there in Tucson. So, Utah will enjoy, I think, playing BYU and being in BYU's conference. But Arizona State, they don't want to be in the Big 12. It's pretty obvious. We wrote about that at Trojans Wire. It's part of the absurdity of realignment. But anyway, Monday was just a wild day with just one big story every 90 minutes or so. And you also had the coaches poll. We're going to talk about that as well. And then for USC, the big news breaking later on Monday, not good news. Dakoda Fields had been a commitment for the 2024 class, shoring up that secondary. He flips to Oregon. And I think the story there, I don't think it's anything about USC staff or what it did. I think the interesting part there is this comes right after Oregon to the Big Ten. I think that is really the timing of that. If you're going to try and draw dots, I know that he did visit Oregon, so he obviously liked what he saw, but still, Oregon going to the Big Ten, that might have been a little bit of a push. And so I don't want to be stuck in the Pac-12. Oh, now that Oregon's in the Big Ten, you do wonder if the Ducks are going to get at least a short-term sugar high, a little bit of a bounce, a little bit of momentum now that they are going to be in the Big Ten. And obviously 2024 recruits are going to be in the Big Ten at Oregon, at Washington. So that's certainly a story to monitor long-term. But in the short term, Oregon gets a player that USC thought it had. Definitely a little bit of a punch for, USC, and because Oregon's going to be playing USC in the Big Ten, it stings even more for Lincoln Riley, also for Dante Williams. And, one of the many aftershocks or, effects, whatever you want to call it, of the Oregon-Washington move to the Big Ten, being part of the past week in college sports, is that Big Ten schedule, which was so intricately crafted and developed, boom, that gets blown up. They're going to have to go back to the drawing board, formulate something new and fresh in the Big Ten. And, now we have to wait and see. And this is why the ACC Stanford Cal, exploratory talks are so interesting. Does the ACC feel the need to make sure that the Big Ten does not get its hands on Stanford and Cal? And in terms of looking at that, is this a matter of ACC administrators and academic types wanting the prestige of Stanford and Cal academically more than anything else, and not allowing the Big Ten to get those schools? Or is there a football-related play, a money-related play at work with the ACC? I'm inclined to think this is more about the academics and prestige, and we don't want the Big Ten to get them. We want to have them for ourselves. And, Stanford, Cal, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, all in the same conference. I mean, you can see why those presidents and chancellors would want to all be together as part of a club, a bi-coastal club, if you will. But, and it's hard to see where the money angle is in football, like where the revenue play is for the ACC and all of this. But anyway, with Stanford and the Big Ten, it's going to be interesting to see if the Big Ten does make a play for Stanford. It doesn't seem like it right now, but that's an unresolved thing. And Stanford has a lot of different choices it can make. Not that it has ultimate leverage, but it has a lot of platters to choose from at the cafeteria in terms of which avenue it wants to really push, make a pitch for, etc. And so I mentioned Stanford in the context of the Big Ten because if Stanford joins, you would then think, that would be 19 schools in the Big Ten. If Stanford joins, you then think a 20th school would be on the way shortly. That would affect how the Big Ten schedule gets reworked. So, going from 16 to 18, that's going to require a reworking of the schedule. But now we need to know, is the Big Ten fixed on 18 or is it going to move to 20? That's going to determine scheduling. It's going to determine the way USC and Oregon and Washington and UCLA are going to play each other, what the rotations are going to be, what the permanent opponents are going to be. The Big Ten in its 16-team configuration and the schedule it released this past June, it did not have the same amount of permanent opponents, fixed annual opponents for everybody. Penn State had 0, Iowa had 3, USC had 1, the game against UCLA. So whether the Big Ten is at 18 or whether it's at 20, that's going to affect how the Big Ten office schedules its football season for 2024 and 2025. They need to go back to the drawing board. So how these and other factors influence recruits and how they perceive the value of USC versus the value of Oregon versus the value of Washington versus the value of Stanford, which pulled in a great 2024 class under Troy Taylor. You have all these different jump balls in the air, and it's going to be fascinating to see how they affect recruiting, not just in the short term, but in the long run. But today, Oregon certainly got a notch on the belt, and USC has to recover a little bit. You also have, I'm not following this stuff too closely because I am focused mostly on realignment, but I know that Florida State has been going great guns in recruiting, and that has elbowed USC a little bit down in the pecking order. So Trojans have some work to do if they want to get that top 5 class and that top 5 position for the 2024 recruiting cycle.
Dakoda Fields is a top 10 cornerback in the nation, top 10 player in the state of California, top 100 player in the 247 Sports composite out of Gardena, California. as Matt alludes to, yes, realignment has certainly made for strange bedfellows when you think about Arizona State traveling to the likes of West Virginia and Ames, Iowa to play conference football games. And realignment expansion has also made for potential strange bedfellows, thinking about Stanford and other schools going all the way to the East Coast, things that we would have never dreamed would be conceivable months ago, let alone years ago, of course, that are very much in play just for the survival of these conferences. A couple things come to mind in regards to an ACC strategy. One would be that I wonder if they're able to bring some of these schools cross country. And Stanford and Cal, correct me if I'm wrong, were the two that were rumored ACC to be in discussions with the Atlantic Coast Conference. The American Conference, looking at the other two or even all four, including Wazoo and Oregon State, but focus back on the ACC. I wonder if they think that that will in some way impress Clemson and Florida State into thinking we are serious, we are in the game, we will make the necessary moves to be and maintain our power conference status. That being one thought. The second being, in place of, as a safety net, as a backup plan to losing the likes of Florida State, Miami, Clemson, or some combination thereof, to maintain Power Five status, the ACC would go the Big 12 direction, and in lieu of no elite programs being available, safeguarding the position of the conference by just adding volume. And if you lose your 3 or 4 best football products, but you supplement with lesser football products, but still mid-level football products, then you still have a league. You're still in the running. You can still compete and have at least a championship winner at the playoff table.
Yeah, and I think what you laid out, Mark, I think the ACC is making that volume play. And when you realize, the Big 12 shielded itself from destruction and death by adding those 4 schools. Obviously, that was Bob Bowlesby, not Brett Yormark, but still, like the Big 12 was proactive in just adding schools, like just adding buffers against disaster. And that's something the Pac-12 did not do when it missed the chance to take on San Diego State and SMU. Adding schools, like it doesn't guarantee your survival, but it increases the odds of it. And even if that means, more members splitting the pie more ways, it's like it's going to create some grumbling from some parts of the conference, but just in terms of surviving, which the Pac-12 has failed to do, the Big 12, was smart in that regard and ultimately successful. And so this does seem like we can all see Florida State wants out of the ACC. Florida State hates it there. I think the ACC sees the writing on the wall. I mean, we don't know when Florida State is able to get out, or when it will ultimately get out, but it will ultimately get out at some point. I think the ACC realizes that, and if Florida State leaves, you think either Miami and or Clemson will be leaving as well. So I do think that this is a volume play by the ACC. It's to get some schools in, and let's realize this: not just Stanford, but especially Cal. Cal's going to be really grateful to the ACC, assuming that it invites the Golden Bears. Like Cal's going to be the person stranded on an island, and the ACC will be its rescuer, its hero. So like Cal's going to have the eternal debt of gratitude, and it will go to bat for the ACC, and will stand by the ACC faithfully no matter what else happens. And that will be a safeguard. And with those other premier academic institutions, North Carolina, Virginia, Duke, like that will be a power center in the ACC, and it's going to make it really hard to blow up the full conference. And you also think of all the other schools in the Research Triangle and in the Carolinas, Wake Forest, NC State. Like the ACC would have like a core if you include Stanford and Cal, and then all those Carolina schools plus Virginia. That's 7 schools. And you would think that with the others, just a few other schools in the conference remaining committed to the ACC, maybe like Boston College, maybe Syracuse, you can kind of pick and choose. Maybe not so much Louisville, because Louisville has flirted with other conferences in the past and has been kind of the nomad, much like TCU has been, much like a few other schools you could readily name. But there can be a power base in the ACC with Stanford and Cal aboard, and it would be really, really hard, if not impossible, to fully blow up the ACC. And of course, one of the things created by the recent wave of realignment, by the Big 12 going to 16 teams and the Big 10 going to 18, where a lot of people think we're just going to go to a Power 2. It's just going to be the Big 10 and the SEC just hoovering up, vacuuming up everyone else. And so it's a real, genuine concern. If you're the ACC, let's not be sucked into, like an SEC on steroids, like a 24 or 28 team SEC. Many people in the industry think we're heading that way. So this is a way, I think, for the ACC to just make sure it survives, because it knows it's not as strong and it doesn't have the leverage of the SEC or the Big Ten. It's definitely well below those two. Better to be alive as a third conference than to do things that could lead to fracturing and splintering, which we've just seen in the Pac-12. I think that is the motivation for the ACC behind this overture towards Stanford and Cal.
If the Big Ten and the SEC do continue on this march, as you just kind of depicted, they've already basically, aside from Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and a possible one or two other schools, they've reached the crescendo of the per school payout. Then you start to delve with teams that are going to decrease the per school payout. So I would question their motives at that point in regards to, yes, are we trying to make sound financial decisions and do what's best for our member schools and have a strong, dominant football conference? They've both reached that level, that's for sure. Or are we looking to just consume the sport and wind up with 32 teams, and it's going to lower the value of the average across the board if you suck up all those Big 12 and ACC schools, but we're just going to come to a landing spot. I think at some point somebody drew a map that took a line from Seattle to about Columbia, South Carolina, basically said, I guess, yeah, one half would, or actually, I guess it would go the other way, wouldn't it? It would go from Los Angeles to Boston, possibly. Who knows what the configuration in terms of, the crisscross of half the nation.
Those are the two diagonals, yeah.
And yes, and then the other half turns out to be the SEC and the Big Ten. And I don't want to see that be the result of all this. And I would, again, highly question the motives of, but as I posted today, I produced a quick short where I just basically said, hey, people are blaming Fox and ESPN for the demise of college football. Don't blame them. They run businesses. Don't even blame Greg Sankey and Kevin Warren and now Tony Petitti. They are hired. It is their role to build their conference into the best brand and the wealthiest commodity they can. Blame going back decades. They're too weak to do anything about it now, but blame the NCAA for not foreseeing what money and TV revenue was doing to this sport. And that's a positive. It should have been worked in a positive way, but the sport should have been brought together. The conferences should have been brought together to do what's best for the sport, and everybody could still have plenty of money and power and territory to go around and have the entire sport be healthy.
One thing we have to say, and your points are really well made and well taken. I mean, the NCAA really fundamentally, it's supposed to be the leadership body, and it's not providing any leadership at all. So to that extent, you're absolutely spot on. But I do think we have to, just take one step above like the NCAA administrative level and remember that the NCAA exists, for its members. Like the NCAA serves at the pleasure of the member institutions that are part of it. And so I think if we're going to really drill deeper and go to the absolute center of all of this, I mean, the NCAA is dropping the ball. Again, you're absolutely right. But there is a deeper layer to this, and that is that if the school presidents and chancellors wanted the NCAA to do different things and to be a very different kind of leadership body, they could do that. Like they could vote, and they could insist that the NCAA have a different mission, a different orientation. I bring this up for a number of reasons, but chiefly we heard Monday evening, John Urand of Sports Business Journal, he reported that the Pac-12 presidents voted down what Urand said in his article was a, quote, significant deal last year. Now, that word significant doesn't really mean much of anything until we get a dollar figure in terms of, annual revenue per year. I'm really interested in learning what the dollar figure was. But even without having the dollar figure there, it does bring up that the Pac-12 president shot down Larry Scott's Pac-16 plan with Texas and Oklahoma and Texas Tech and Oklahoma State in 2011. So if we don't know this, but if the dollar per year figure for the Pac-12, which the Pac-12 presidents rejected last year, was at or near the 31.7 million that Brett Yormark delivered to the Big 12, then that would mean that the presidents were objectively more centrally responsible than George Kliavkoff for the death of the Pac-12. Now, again, we don't know the number, but if the number was in the ballpark of 31.7, then that would mark a second time in 12 years that the Pac-12 presidents shot down a deal which, if passed, would have been enormously beneficial to the Pac-12 solely in terms of revenue for member schools. I mean, a Pac-16 with Texas and Oklahoma joining the Pac-12 would have been a revenue gusher for the Pac-12. It would have been, really impressive. It would have fortified the conference without question, would have drastically improved its TV value. We would not be here mourning the death of the Pac-12 if that hadn't happened. And so if this deal had numbers comparable to the Big 12, again, we don't know, but hopefully that's going to be unearthed pretty soon, later this week, then that would mean the Pac-12 presidents again restrained their commissioner, prevented their commissioner from acting, and that would really underscore the point that the presidents and chancellors, not just, I use the Pac-12 as a representative example, but then extending that to, hey, these chancellors and presidents, they can tell the NCAA what they want, and whatever they're telling the NCAA, it's not leading toward leadership. It's not leading toward good governance. It's not leading toward the proper focus. They can shift this orientation if they want, but somehow, for some strange reason, not enough of them, if any of them, seem interested in that. And it really just projects the image of a bunch of academics with their heads stuck in the sand, not having a clue how the real world operates, not having a clue how, what's really motivating people on the ground making their decisions. If they want the NCAA to be different, they can do that, but they're not. And we really need that kind of moment for lots of reasons, Mark, and for everyone watching here in the Voice of College Football. But one of the biggest things is, obviously this is a football show, but it's time to divorce football from all the other sports. Like it is just so nakedly obvious now. Not that it wasn't nakedly obvious before, but like now it's just like being bashed right between the eyes repeatedly. Like no one can claim to be ignorant of this point now. And if we have Stanford volleyball players traveling to Blacksburg, Virginia, and other ACC sites for regular competitions, and we have Washington Husky fans going to Piscataway, New Jersey, for Big Ten, swimming meets, or track and field competitions. Come on, what are we doing here? And those athletes in Pac-12 locations, they signed up for an experience where they could stay in their home region with their families, with their relatives. They're not making a money play. They want to just play softball. They want to play volleyball. They want to swim in their home regions. They did not sign up for this. And we have to find a way to turn all of this around, because this is affecting thousands of young people all across the country. We got out of the pandemic. We talked a whole lot about the mental health of young people being able to get outside, exercise, to not have their lives be totally brought to a halt. I mean, look, do we care about young people or not? Do we care about all these thousands of human beings, 18 to 21 years old, or not? Like, it is time to get serious about these kinds of things and really make that separation between the revenue sports and the non-revenue sports. And are saner heads going to prevail? Can we unwind these provisions in which Olympic sport athletes are being asked to now fly across the country like professionals? And, maybe a few of them will get NIL endorsements, but not most of them. And yet we're going to treat them like NBA players, basically. Like, this is just a clown car, and there's no leadership in place because the college presidents and chancellors just have their heads stuck up their behinds.
It's a great point, Matt, and I completely agree. In the real world, in a Pollyanna world, I would love it to where the universities and all the sports programs could exist in the same conference and then compete as rivals against their rival schools and all of that. But we've just reached a point, as you very eloquently displayed there and explained, that we've just reached the point of no return when it comes to that. So for the softball player at Arizona State, yes, there's no reason to be traveling to West Virginia and Iowa and other locations. Now, play in your area, and you described it much better than I am in regards to, yes, for family and friends that want to attend the games, both home and away. Sure, there's room to make one massive trip, let's say each season, for a softball team in particular, especially those teams in the North, to have a Florida swing or a Carolina swing or a California swing early in the season and get that experience in, but not make it a full-time job where you're traveling thousands of miles on a regular basis for 4 months. That's ridiculous. The point about the NCAA, from my standpoint, is that what I was calling upon the NCAA is where I just feel we've passed the point of its effectiveness, and I think they failed, in the last few decades, and now they've been rendered useless. And for some reason, as you outlined, they were called upon to be a leadership organization, and what they've been this entire time of modern athletics, and football in particular, has been a disciplinary committee. Basically, that's what they've been. They have followed leads, made investigations, and doled out discipline. That's been their whole function, or 90 some percent of it.
Yeah, and we're talking, and the NCAA is focused on like Jim Harbaugh and hamburgers at Michigan, and are you giving your athletes too many meals, or like, what are we doing? Like, is this what you want to spend your life doing as an administrator or as a compliance officer within the NCAA superstructure? Like, this is what's absorbing man hours and billable time. It's just like, just lost focus on what really matters here. And this should be about creating opportunities and creating, good, healthy life situations. It shouldn't be like this nickel and dime focus on, well, are you using the proper things in the proper way? Like, are you using the right salad fork? Basically, it's all about manners, norms, and etiquette, as opposed to just, hey, are you, as an athlete, are you in position to succeed? What more can we do for you? How can we empower you? How can we put you in the best position to thrive as a young person? It's all out of whack. So just in the bigger picture, as we look at realignment, like, we're considering all these wacky scenarios, like Oregon State and Washington State to the AAC as a possibility. And one of the things we need to be looking at is, with this Mountain West Pac-4 merger, I mean, if the ACC is looking at Stanford and Cal, that's really bad news for the Mountain West. Like, that point needs to be affirmed, because Stanford probably a couple weeks ago was thinking, maybe the Big Ten will want us. Maybe the Big Ten will reach out to us. Now you have the ACC in play. And what that does is that Stanford is now thinking about the Big Ten and the ACC as possibilities, such that Stanford's probably going to now be disappointed if it doesn't land at least one of the two spots. So that really takes the Mountain West lower, in my estimation, as an ultimate desirable outcome for Stanford. I think that, Stanford going independent in football is something that Stanford could realistically do. I came up with a Stanford independent schedule. You play some service academies, you play some Mountain West schools, like you'll definitely play San Jose State to have a low, short distance commute. You'll play maybe one team in the state of Texas to establish that regional connection. And you play the Big Ten teams, as an independent. You'll play the Big Ten teams that are in the West. You'll be able to play USC, UCLA, keep those California rivalries going. And then you'll play the service academies, like Navy Stanford is a pretty natural fit. You can do that home and home every year, like the way Navy plays Notre Dame. Stanford can basically do its own version, West Coast style, of what Notre Dame has been doing as an independent. That seems pretty reasonable. But then when you get into all the other sports, it's hard to think that Stanford's going to accept a Mountain West membership. I mean, you think about Stanford women's basketball in particular, that's a world-class, nationally relevant sports program. That program is not going to want to be in the Mountain West. It's going to want to be in the Big Ten or the ACC. So I think this ACC Stanford Cal exploration has a lot of different meanings, but I think one of them is that it undercuts the idea that the Mountain West is going to be able to merge with all four of the Pac-4 schools. Might just be Oregon State and Washington State at most. Then the Mountain West has to consider whether it wants to keep some of its bottom feeders. I'm thinking Hawaii. Like, I think Hawaii is in real danger of being left out of the Mountain West in football. Will be replaced by either SMU or Tulane. Schools that the Pac-12 talked to SMU. So maybe the Mountain West might think about bringing the Ponies aboard for the new conference with Washington State and Oregon State to try and bump up the television value a little bit. So I think it's looking grim for the Mountain West in terms of the realignment chessboard, but it just underscores the point that all of this is being done for money. The welfare of the student athlete, especially in the non-football sports, it's not really being considered at all.
My initial reaction to Stanford, even though I brought it up last week and said, what about Stanford going independent? My initial response when you brought it up again this week, Matt, was, do they get lost in the sea of everyone else being conferences and Notre Dame? They're just a different deal, a different brand, and people keep track of them and they're playing significant games. Do they just kick with no identity, with nothing else as a foundation for their schedule, for what network they're on? So I quickly went to BYU because that would be a comparable comparison in regards to BYU just being out on an island, piecing together a football schedule. And I wasn't so concerned because I've always made this evaluation, Matt, as I have rated and ranked schedules. Typically, I didn't do it this past off season, but typically every off season I will rank the schedules 1 through 65 in the Power 5. And I always make this comment about BYU because I've included them in the rundown. They always have the oddest, strangest schedule of anyone because they lock in. They basically play a high-end Pac-12 schedule the first month, and then they're able to find a few other like grade A type opponents a few other times, and then they're playing even the likes of Wagner and schools like that, just trying to piece together a schedule when everybody else is in their silos of playing conference schedules. But I was more interested in this comparison between BYU and Stanford to see what networks BYU played on last season, their last year as an independent. And the outcome is better than I remembered. They played on ESPNU against South Florida. They had an ESPN game against Baylor. Then they played on Fox against Oregon. They played on ESPN2 against Wyoming. ESPN against Utah State. That was on a Thursday, as you might imagine. A Utah State BYU game would be on ESPN. They had the Notre Dame game, of course, on NBC. They played Arkansas on ESPN, a 3:30 game. ESPNU for Liberty, ESPN2 for East Carolina, and FS2 for Boise State. And then Utah Tech. There's another one of those type games that they have to kind of cobble together and trying to put the schedule together. That was on ESPN3, and then they finished up against Stanford on FS1. So actually, the results of the television landing spots for BYU was better than I remembered.
Yeah, and I think Stanford could do certainly as well, if not better, than what BYU has done. But it's going to be interesting to see how Stanford, if Stanford looks for a split independent football and then joining a conference in the other sports, or if it feels the need to have to join another Power 5 conference in football. So, lots of realignment stuff. There's going to continue to be more rumors, more exploratory talks. But I think we can now pivot in our conversation. We already hit on USC's recruiting and just the slog it's been in recent weeks, and also the possibility that Oregon could be getting at least a short-term bounce from going to the Big Ten. But the other, really big story, the coaches poll. So USC comes in at number 6 in the preseason coaches poll, and I'm fascinated. Like 3 SEC teams in the top 5. First off, Alabama at number 3 with Tyler Buckner at quarterback. I think Alabama's wildly overrated. But even if you disagree with that, even if you think Alabama is just right at number 3, that's where the Crimson Tide should be. The idea that 3 SEC teams are going to finish in the top 5, highly unlikely that all 3 of those teams are going to max out, have, 1-loss seasons. That they would all have to walk a tightrope. Like the Alabama, LSU, they play each other. You would think that Alabama or LSU is going to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. There's no margin for error if all those 3 teams are going to finish in the top 5 at the end of the season. Like, they have to win every game other than the ones that they play against each other, and I'm not seeing that. So for USC fans, seeing USC at number 6 might not seem like a great endorsement of USC, but if you then realize that, you're not going to have 3 SEC teams finishing in the top 5, most likely, not a guarantee, but most likely. And then, Michigan and Ohio State, they were both in the top 4 last year. The idea that they can thread that needle again, no, it's obviously possible because it just did happen in 2022. But the idea that it's going to happen 2 straight years and that Ohio State's going to really be able to figure everything out with C.J. Stroud gone, to the extent that, it will lose only 1 game, which it would have to do if it's going to finish in the top 4 and return to the playoff. I'm not liking those odds for Ohio State. So really, if USC does finish ahead of everyone it's predicted to finish ahead of in the coaches poll, so Penn State and everyone on down, Clemson, Tennessee, and then, of course, obviously Washington, Utah, Oregon. If USC finishes ahead of all those teams 7 or lower, Trojans are probably going to make the playoff, because I don't think you're going to have 3 SEC teams finishing ahead of the Trojans, and you're probably not going to have Michigan and Ohio State going back-to-back years being in the top 4, being in the playoff. So, and I don't associate too much importance in preseason polls, but just if USC fans are looking at this poll and they're trying to see, is this good? Is this bad? Is this neutral? I'd say it's pretty good on balance, just because of the composition of the top 5 in front of USC and the low degree of likelihood, the low degree of probability that that's going to be an intact top 5 at the end of the season.
Well, it also depends on what your viewpoint is of what a top 25 should be preseason and what the voters are trying to do. So I have no issue with the approach. I think everybody can have a different approach. I would like the approach during the season to be extremely similar, but the preseason, there are those who are simply saying, we are predicting the final top 25. There are particular people doing something close to what you are outlining there that are saying, I'm looking at how good the teams are, but I'm also looking at the schedules and determining these are the 25 teams that I believe will be placed 1 through 25 at the conclusion of the season. There are other people who say, I don't care what the schedule says. I am determining that these are the 25 best teams in the country in order. And regardless of what the schedule is, this is what I believe it to be. And the 5 best teams in the country could be in the SEC, and I'm going to rank them like that if I so choose. So I think either one's valid. Actually, I side with the latter. That's how I do it. When I throw out a top 25, it's at any time during the off season, it's what I just believe to be the 25 best teams in the country in order. Yes, Michigan and Ohio State threaded the needle last year. Like you say, it makes it even more difficult for 3 teams within the same conference to thread the needle. And to a further extent, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State would have to thread the needle and only lose games to one another for those 3 to finish in the top 7 in a similar way. So,
yep. And I agree with that if you are going to bother to take the time to do a preseason poll, something which I would never do because I don't believe in them, but if you were going to do it, yes, you would rank them on what you believe are the best teams in order. If you think LSU is 1 spot better than USC, you rank LSU 1 spot better than USC. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I'm not one that really does it much. I'm not saying I've never done it or won't do it in the future because it's something that creates conversation. So it's good for business and people enjoy it and people love rankings and ratings, and I do as well. But I don't put much stock in it, including mine. Now, once one game is played, I warned since we've had a nice upsurge in subscribers here in the last couple weeks with an extra 1,000, I've warned them that once they see that initial top 25 that actually makes sense, they are forewarned in regards to what that is going to look like after one football game, because it is going to be based strictly on what has happened on the field and no assumptions about what is going to happen in the future.
That's right. Marshall beats Notre Dame early in the season. Marshall gets a number 8 national ranking after week 2. Like, that is how it's supposed to work. If you're going to bother to do polls, right? And that's the big thing. Like, if you're committed to the discipline, if you're committed to the practice, that's how it's supposed to be. But of course, mainstream media, television coverage never covers the sport like that. If Mark Rogers was the commissioner of college football, or if he was, the director of college game day, we would have a much more informed college football public. That's for damn sure.
Well, I appreciate that. And Ohio State and Michigan fans, be forewarned, because I know that both of those teams play 3 cream puffs out of the gate. Now, Ohio State does jump in against Notre Dame on the final weekend of September, but Michigan goes from 3 cream puffs out of conference right into a Rutgers Big Ten opener. So you will have undefeated records most likely, but be ranked. Maybe you won't even be ranked at that point. So just understand that it's the evaluation of the results and the performance, at least with me. I have been salivating, Matt, to get to this comment just because I think it's so ludicrous, and sometimes I enjoy these. Nick, thank you so much for the contribution. We do appreciate that. And thank you for being here. Is USC looking forward at joining Michigan in the Big Ten to show on a yearly basis how flaccid Ohio State is in the trenches? I think they should. USC is easily a more respectable brand than Ohio State. Just clarifying here, Nick, are we talking about the Ohio State that has more conference championships, national championships better winning percentage, more bowl victories, more major bowl victories, Rose Bowl victories, more NFL draft picks, first round draft picks, Heisman Trophy winners, and major award winners in the last 50 years than Michigan? I'm just clarifying that. Is that the Ohio State? When you say OSU, just okay, you did say Ohio State. Got it. All right, just checking.
So, USC is interested in winning the Big Ten. USC is interested in winning national championships. That's what USC is interested in. In terms of, is USC a more respectable brand than Ohio State? Like, what does respectable mean? I would only say that, I think when people try to characterize USC football and assess USC's place in the larger national pecking order, the larger national conversation, I think this is a point where the one point where USC fans and most college football fans, even those who hate USC, don't want to see USC succeed. I think even USC's fiercest critics, the people who want to see USC fail, the thing that they will acknowledge about USC is that when the program is really rocking and rolling, when USC figures it out, when USC cracks the code, gets the secret sauce, whatever image or metaphor you want to find, then USC rockets to the very top of the sport. We saw it under Pete Carroll, saw it under John McKay, saw it in the late 1970s under John Robinson. Now, of course, when USC hasn't had the right coach, that program really suffers. And Ohio State has really been the benchmark for, relentless annual decade by decade consistency. Ohio State has not had the deep dips that USC has had, but when USC really figures it out and gets it right, the Trojans are at the very top of the sport. They're a program no one wants to deal with, and that in many ways is what the 2023 season is about. Can USC elevate itself from the very good standard of 2022, rise to that ultra elite standard in 2023? I'm not predicting what's going to happen. I do think USC is going to go 11-1. I am on record as saying that. But I don't think it's any kind of lock or guarantee that USC is going to become that elite playoff level team this year, because there are questions on the defense. But I do think relative to the competition, USC can go 11-1 in the 12-game regular season once again. And I think most USC fans would sign up for that if offered that possibility right now. But this season is really about proof of concept. And just reading the comments for everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, so much worrying about USC recruiting. Look, it's not as though this staff, which did such a great job in June, suddenly forgot how to recruit in July or stopped working hard in July. I mean, things change. Kids making decisions. And of course, what we're seeing with realignment, all these things swirling around, it's not as though the USC staff stopped doing its job. I mean, this staff was doing a phenomenal job. Everything was coming together. You're going to hit some potholes. You're going to hit some bumps in the road when you're a program which has not had proof of concept at the level that Kirby Smart does, at the level that Nick Saban does, at the level that Jim Harbaugh has now recently established the past few years at Michigan, at the level Ohio State has generally had over the last decade with Urban Meyer, now Ryan Day, continuing to keep that program in the top 5 of the United States. USC has not reached that level. And so because it hasn't reached that level, you will get moments of uncertainty. You will get moments of hesitancy from recruits. Like, do I really want to go to USC? The coaching staff, in my mind, is doing a really good job. I don't think we can say great job just yet, because USC has to attain that higher standing. So you can't give the coaching staff an A+, but certainly like a B+ or A-. I wouldn't say this coaching staff was failing. It was a top 5 class just a few weeks ago. Let's allow this cycle to continue. I mean, USC fans understandably were freaked out a year ago with the Josh Connerly and Francis Mauigoa swings and misses in recruiting along the offensive line. But Josh Henson regrouped from that. He rebounded from that. He showed that he could be a strong offensive line recruiter. And, Dante Williams, for all that I've said about him, he's shown that he's an elite recruiter on defense for USC. So we need to let this cycle run its course. And the biggest thing of all is that if USC wins the Pac-12 at the very least, and then especially if it makes the college football playoff this year, that's proof of concept. That's an affirmation that the program is, if it isn't at that elite status, it's certainly headed in the right direction. And you're going to win more recruiting battles in future seasons, in future cycles. That's going to take care of itself. The winning is going to take care of itself if USC is able to achieve it. So for people worrying about the 2024 recruiting cycle, hey, it's less than 3 weeks until game 1 against San Jose State. This is the last Pac-12 football season ever, and USC wants to have that great send-off going into the Big Ten, and it's about getting back to Las Vegas, getting back to the Pac-12 championship game, finishing the job there, getting to the playoff, seeing what kind of magic this team can create. Let's enjoy the ride. Let's rev up for the season and not get too far down the recruiting rabbit hole and, the twists and turns and the permutations. I mean, July was undeniably a bad month. It's been a bad 4 weeks for USC in recruiting, but like when things had been going as great as they were, like, do you think this coaching staff just got lazy or stopped working? Like, as though it stopped trying or it stopped understanding, the secret in terms of what to do and how to do it? Come on, let's not panic. Let's not jump off the deep end like that. And let's now focus in on this season and USC taking care of some unfinished business as it tries to return to the Pete Carroll standard under Lincoln Riley.
Our buddy Tim Prangley is mentioning to look at the average player ranking, and this is a conversation that I had a number of times early in the recruiting cycle when Michigan was vaulting to the top 2 spots. So we'll take it from the top. So we all see what the ranking is there on the far left, and then we see the number of commits, and Georgia is doing both. They're grabbing quantity and supreme quality with the best average player rating, but Ohio State's right there. And those two actually, when you look at average player rating, are killing it. They are basically 2 points higher per average rating than anybody else. And then you see Michigan with a really good class, but fortified again by 27 commits. And then as we get down toward USC, and again, Alabama, we need to look out for Alabama because their per player rating is just under 93. So they're on that level as well. Those 3 are out recruiting everyone. But to Tim's point, USC at 91.67 with only 15 commits. So they have a higher per player rating than Oklahoma, 2 spots higher, Texas A&M 3 spots higher, Clemson, LSU, Oregon, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan at number 5. So they're higher than all of those, and Florida State at number 4. So the quality is quite good for Lincoln Riley and company.
Yeah. I mean, and we have plenty of time left in the 2024 cycle, not to convey the attitude of, oh, it's just going to automatically work out. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's just that USC is not yet at that level as a program where it's going to get the benefit of the doubt, in terms of recruits making up their minds, in terms of flipping, to Oregon, as we've just seen with Dakoda Fields. USC hasn't yet regained that airtight level, that Kirby, that Saban have, that Harbaugh is really, is getting right now, based on what he's done the past 2 years. Like, you have to win at an elite level. You have to get the reputation of being a skull crusher in the industry. That's when you're going to lock down everything and you're going to go click, clack, and you're just going to trample on everyone else. USC's not there yet. So the winning's going to take care of itself. The winning will solve the problem. The business of USC is winning and making sure that Alex Grinch is able to do the job on defense this year. Like, that should be the focus of every USC football fan. Like, not to de-emphasize recruiting, but just The point is, if USC has a big year on the field, it's going to have a big off season on the trail, and the recruiting episodes such as this one with a flip to Oregon, they're going to decrease in frequency and significance, and that will resolve itself. So, as Al Davis said, just win, baby. That is the solution to the lingering incomplete elements. Let's say, I wouldn't necessarily say flaws, but just not being at the very top standard. The winning will fix that problem. Believe me.
Slap Happy, thank you so much for the super sticker contribution. Appreciate you being here for all the USC shows. Slap Happy, we see you on the Trojan Conquest live show as well. That's every Sunday night, folks, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific time. Trojan Conquest live with Tim and with Rick. And I believe Tony's on board with those two each and every Sunday night right here at the Voice of College Football USC. And don't forget about our exclusive content right here at the Voice of College Football, courtesy Matt and myself, and the conversations we have. We have posted 11 segments. And I tell you, folks, every week, Matt will bring me a topic. And I am rarely floored or fazed by any topics. Of course, I've been doing this for 30 years to some extent, to some degree. And Matt just brings just a unique perspective, angle, and not just answering the question, but just to pose some of the topics that he has. And it's always such a fun conversation with Matt. I learn a lot. I do my best to contribute, and we put together a segment just about every week, and we've got 11 in tow. So please join us for the exclusive content. It's well worth your while. Go to the front page of the channel here at the Voice of College Football USC and grab one of those 2 top tier selections. One of the top 2 tiers. There we go. One of the top 2 tiers, folks. And be a premium member subscriber here at the Voice of College Football and knock yourself out, because tremendous conversations. And we also invite you to bring your requests, your topics that you would like to hear Matt and myself discuss here at the Voice of College Football for our exclusive content offering. All right. So we will be at 2 weeks and counting this Saturday to San Jose State. Do we know the network and the time on that game yet? I'm sure we do.
Pac-12 Network.
That's
folks,
right.
you're gonna have to suffer through Pac-12 Network for the first 2 weeks against San Jose State on August 26th, Nevada on September 2nd. San Jose State game starts at 5 o'clock, I believe, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And that just brings up a point that USC and Notre Dame are going to be the 2 high-profile teams in the country playing week 0. So you want to get on over to our USC post-game show here at the Voice of College Football after the San Jose State game goes final on the night of August 26th. Like we know that you'll be watching your favorite team, whether Connor Johnson watching his Oregon State Beavers, or all the Michigan fans that regularly visit this show because they want to get the inside intel on future Big Ten member USC. You're going to be watching Michigan, you're going to be watching Ohio State, you're going to be watching whatever team you follow across the country. But August 26th, like, you get a free shot. You get to watch USC when no other elite top 10 teams are playing. You'll want to get over to our post game show on the night of August 26th after that USC San Jose State game goes final here at the Voice of College Football.
There might be one team out there that would beg to differ with Notre Dame lining up against Navy.
In terms of elite status?
In terms of being a elite status top brand in play. And we will also have Notre Dame post-game, folks,
yes,
after every Notre Dame
and
game.
that'll be in the morning because it's a Dublin kickoff. So nicely spaced out. There won't be any overlap.
Folks, we will bring you further details as we get close to the season. But as it stands right now, we will have post-game shows for USC, Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, Iowa, Alabama, Georgia, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia Tech, here at the Voice of College Football on all the various channels.
We're getting closer. Hey, Connor Johnson, you want a San Jose State scouting report? That'll be game week. That'll be in a couple weeks. We'll definitely look at the Spartans during game week.
We will. I will study up. And at least for the Pac-12 opponents and the major non-conference opponents, we will do our best to bring in media from those teams to present the opposing side and really give us a good look and perspective on those teams and those programs, as we did last year. So. All right, another week of USC Trojans Live, as we will only have, I believe, 2 more before we will be reviewing a USC performance on the field that counts, folks. And again, as Tim and others are reminding everyone, please join Matt at Trojans Wire and follow him on Twitter. It's simply at Matt Zemek on Twitter. He is a tremendous follow, and his work at Trojans Wire is exceptional, and the insight that he provides on the game we all love is rare. So we appreciate it was a gold mine for me to find Matt at whatever point that happened. I don't even remember now.
I don't either.
Each other on Twitter.
We're just so busy cranking out shows every week.
But we've been doing this now 64 consecutive weeks, and this is all because of Matt. So we appreciate his contribution. Again, we've got a big doubleheader scheduled each and every week for you. Sundays with Tim and with Rick, Trojan Conquest Live at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. And then also we've got our Trojans Live show right here at the Voice of College Football on Monday night. And Gerardo asking, are we able to upgrade subscriptions? I cannot imagine that you would not be able to upgrade your subscription. If you have kind of poke around and attempt to do that, if you have an issue where you can't figure that out, Gerardo, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail. But first, give it a shot. Look around, see if you can get that figured out. If you can't, then we will certainly follow up on that. But we appreciate you asking about that. Again, everyone, channel subscriptions with exclusive content with Matt and myself right here at the Voice of College Football USC.
Just want to duck in this final thing before we end the show. USC fans following my work at Trojans Wire, you might have noticed not a ton of USC content or deep dives into what's going on at preseason camp. This is the unfortunate part of the business that I get paid based on page views and how many people read what I write. We've had about 1 million page views the past 2 days because people just, eat this realignment stuff up like nobody's business. I have to write about realignment if I'm going to get a decent size paycheck. That's just the reality of the business as it is. I don't necessarily like it, but that is how the business goes. So I'm covering realignment now. I hope, as I'm sure you do, that all of this stuff dies down and we can just drill deep into football, but just a little bit of an explanation why you're not getting, too many deep dives on USC football. Realignment is what pays the bills right now, much as all these conferences are trying to pay their bills. So just wanted to put out that note in case you think you're getting shortchanged. It's a reality of the business at Trojans Wire. Just wanted to duck that in.
Basically the same here, folks. You know that ever since realignment exploded with the Oklahoma and Texas move 2 summers ago, that there are YouTube channels out there that I'm not real familiar with, but I've become somewhat familiar with because my suggested traffic by YouTube just keeps popping up. The college football YouTube channels that I've never heard of that talk realignment every day, whether it's valid or just hearsay, rumors, whatever it is, because you folks cannot get enough of it. You know that I've taken a balanced approach. I present the realignment discussion when there's either breaking news that's actual factual news, or there have been statements and reports that, lead us in a certain direction for a valid conversation. But much to what Matt's saying, we went live. Well, we've gone live. I counted 33 hours that we did live streaming in like 4 days, all on realignment. And we just had massive crowds. One in particular, well, it was the Oregon Washington news to the Big Ten. We had pushing 1,200 people online.
Yeah, and I joined Mark for a call-in show Friday morning. I parachuted in for like half an hour or so. I was up at like 6:15 in the morning out here in Phoenix. 800 people viewing the live show.
Yes,
And I mean,
that was without any notice. That was
without
just
any notice. And like a good night for a USC show is like 200 people. So 800, it's, early in the morning over breakfast and coffee for, just random generalized realignment talk. Like that's what people are just, they can't get enough of it. So that's the business. That's the reality. Again, I don't like it. And I don't, much as I don't like the Pac-12 dying, like I wish it was still intact, but things happen. And in terms of the business of editing a website and getting paid for it, churning out realignment listicles, that's my world right now. I did not choose this, but that is what I have to do. So,
hey, Matt, one quick
thank you,
question
Rick.
concerning.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone else in the comments too.
Absolutely. And I'm going to follow up on what you just said in explaining your business situation and then everyone's response there, because we in turn appreciate you showing your appreciation for what we do. Much like the like button here, Matt, is there a way to show our appreciation when we visit Trojans Wire to, get you more into traffic?
It's just that when you read the listicle and scroll down through all of the 15 or 20 listicle slides, because that maximizes the page view. Don't parachute out after the first or second slide. Just read the whole thing and then share it if you think it's good and you got something out of it. That's all you need to do. Like there's no bonus membership, subscription, or anything. Just read and share. That's all I need to do. Thank you.
There it is, folks. Spend some time on Trojans Wire. Share that with your college football friends and family that will invest that time as well in it. Show Matt your appreciation. We sure appreciate Matt making this show happen each and every week. Matt, have a great rest of your week. We are one day closer to USC and college football for 2023. We will see everybody back here next Sunday and next Monday.